Hey, this is Bryce Harper, and welcome to the Philly Show.
Welcome to the Philly Show, everybody. Brought to you by Citizens. From making a plan to reaching your goals, make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of the Phillies. Guys, we're super excited to be here today. This is our first live show with Ruben Amaro Jr., the venerable Ruben Amaro Jr., the esteemed Jim Salsbury, and of course our very special guest, Phillies managing partner John Middleton. John is part of our Citizens conversation today. And John, thank you so much for joining us. We know you are a busy man, so thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Happy to do it.
So John, the team is off to a 4-1 start. And Jim and I talked to you, I think it was the first day of spring training in Clearwater.
Yeah.
And you were very optimistic, confident about the team going into the season, of course, and understandably so. What have you seen from these first 5 games that maybe has you kind of reinforcing those beliefs about this team and where it could potentially go in the next several months?
So I think the first thing it says the pitching has generally been what we advertised it to be. I think the starting rotation is tremendous. It has the ability. I think it will prove to be the best rotation in all of baseball by the end of the season. I think it's going to, frankly, be interested in Ruben's opinion. It's going to get close to the 11 team. I mean, it's really hard at the top of the 11 rotation when you look at Holiday and Lee and Hamels to equal that. Certainly, Zack can be as good as any pitcher we've ever had. But the bottom of our rotation, I think, is going to be materially better than the bottom of the 11 rotation. So you put the 5 guys together on both rotations, mix them up, and I think at the end of 2025, it's going to look an awful lot like 2011, and that's without considering Andrew Painter coming up in July-ish, whatever that is, and other things. So we don't even obviously have Ranger back yet. I think the bullpen's generally been strong. The hitters have been good. They haven't, they're not going 3 for 5 or 2 for 5 every single game, but they find a way and come together. It's tended to be towards the end of the game, obviously, against the relief pitching. They really pummel it, and they can string together runs and hits really well. And frankly, I love kind of the small ball aspects of last night's game.
Yeah.
I loved Rojas's 2 bunts. I love the way Kyle came home on that play. I just think really heads-up plays and new things. You need to be able to do that over a course of 100. Well, if you want to go to the postseason and win 175 games or so, in order to win in the postseason.
Right. So I was curious. There are a lot of people talked about making big changes during the offseason. There were some changes made. How do you speak to that, and how do you feel about some of the moves that Dave Dombrowski has made so far?
So I start with the fact I talk to people all the time about Dave. I mean, I've had the privilege of working for now 20 years with Pat Gillick, who is a legitimate Hall of Famer, who's done things that very few people in the Hall of Fame have done. And if you look at Dave's career, he matches Pat. Almost. They both have won World Series titles with 2 different franchises. Dave's only won 2. Pat's won 3. But Dave has taken 4 different teams to the World Series. He's the only GM in the history of baseball who's ever taken more than 2 different teams to the World Series. And that tells you a lot about who Dave Dombrowski is. And so I don't get in the way of Dave Dombrowski. What that tells me is that guy has probably forgotten more this morning about technical baseball and evaluation of baseball talent than I'll ever know in my life. So my job is to encourage Dave, to kind of knock down the obstacles for him, and basically get him the money that he needs to put the team on the field that he wants to put on the field. And so, I always thought, he's got a great eye. He's got his staff, his key lieutenants have great eyes too for talent. The medical staff is, I think, we're as good as anybody. You look at the pitching rotation over the last 4 or 5 years and how good these guys are and how healthy they've been. So when they start evaluating people like Romano and Kepler for how they're going to perform this year, I have a lot of confidence in them. I mean, you go all the way back to Zack when he came to us. He came to us with an injury history, and we looked at him and said, "No, this guy's absolutely fine." So I think I have a lot of confidence in Dave, and to date his decisions have proven to be really good ones.
No doubt.
John, Todd mentioned we spoke to you back in spring training, first day of pitchers and catchers, in fact, I think it was.
Yep.
And I asked you, knowing how competitive you are and how much you want it, and how intense you are, been to postseason 3 years in a row, and haven't gotten there. I asked you that day, what is going to be your message to this ball club when you address them to open spring training? You said, I'm going to keep that to myself. Are you at liberty now to say what that message was?
Well, yeah, probably about 48 hours later, because once I addressed the team, it's kind of more or less out there. So I had really two themes this year, which I think are important anyway, but coming on the heels of last season's postseason, which was really a tough loss to take. I talked about the need to be adaptable and accountable. And I used a conversation I had with Roy Halladay's father out in Colorado in 2010. I was sitting next to him. Roy was pitching. Roy was kind of doing what he always does when he's pitching well, which is mowing people down. About the seventh inning, I looked at his father and I said, I understand you were Roy's first pitching coach. And he said, yeah. And I said, so how many of his 5 pitches did you teach him? And he goes, none. I said, what do you mean none? He goes, none. I said, not even his fastball? He goes, no, not even his fastball. I said, you may remember Roy came up, struggled, and the Blue Jays sent him down to the low levels of minors, not like AAA, single A ball. And Roy thought his career was over and almost walked away. But he said he stuck with it and he decided he'd need to learn 5 new pitches if he were going to make it. So he jettisoned all 5 of the pitches he had, learned 5 new pitches, and came up. And I said, so he's using those pitches? He goes, no. So what do you mean, no? He said, well, 7 or 8 years in, he's thinking he's getting a little too predictable, so he's learned 5 new pitches. And he said, look, sometimes it's as simple as moving from one side of the rubber to the next. Sometimes it's a matter of a slight change in a grip on maybe, curveball or something like that. But the point was that this guy was constantly reinventing himself. As good as he constantly was reinventing himself because he saw the need to do that. So about 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in the stands here talking to Mike Schmidt, telling him that story. I said, Mike, does it make sense that a guy could have 15 pitches over the course of his professional career? Mike just looks at me and goes, well, yeah, because I had 3 different swings in my career.
That's right.
And he said, in point of fact, I not only had 3 swings, John, but in the middle of each of those swings, I made such a major adjustment that people could actually look at me and say, you had 6 different swings over your career, but I consider it 3, each one having a major mid-course correction. And so that was the message to the team. And the point I said is, it's not that they're Hall of Famers, so they have the ability to do that. I said, they're in the Hall of Fame because they did that. I mean, they saw the need to change. They saw the need to continue to push themselves, to learn something new, to be better. And I think that was an important message. And I think the other thing is you have to be accountable. And it's accountable to yourself, accountable to your teammates, accountable to your managers and your staff, the front office, to the fans. I mean, you really have to be pushing yourself. And we have I think a really terrific staff, beginning with Rob, obviously, but all 3, these guys are great. And they're here to help the players. I think when the players accept the help, I think they get better. And I think there's plenty of, you could look at plenty of pitchers or plenty of position players who have learned from Kevin and Caleb about how to get a little bit better. And a little bit better at this level is a big difference, or can be a big difference.
John, you mentioned Mike Schmidt, I think, of 1980, of course, like everybody does. Do you see any parallels or potential similarities between the 2025 Phillies and the 1980 Phillies in that they lost in the NLCS 76, 77, 78. They bring in Pete Rose. They don't even make the playoffs in 1979.
No, they don't.
And everybody's like, this team is probably cooked. They don't have what, can they get over the top? And this group, 22, 23, 24, falling short of the ultimate prize. Is this team going to be able to get over the edge? Do you see any potential similarities between that team? And if so, what is it?
Well, I think I do see them, and I think one of the biggest things is, first of all, there's a lot of talent on both squads.
Right.
And you can throw in that '08 squad for added measure, because I think there's similarities between that squad and this squad, too, that are important. But I think when you've gone through what the years that the 76, 77, 78 Phillies did, and 79, throw that in, and then you compare it to what these guys are going through, you got to come back hungry and hungrier every year. And everybody knows that an athlete's career is short, that there's been, this is now the 4th year, and that's a pretty big chunk of a pro athlete's career. Unless you're 22 years old and you think, well, I can do this forever. But most of these guys aren't, and they realize that they're closer to the end than they are to the beginning. And I think that's a great motivation for players. What I do see, though, I think this team, Ruben, is because of the strength of the pitching staff, and if you look at like 10 and 11 in particular, I think those two teams, and especially 11, were really driven by their pitching staffs. And, I mean, as Dave Dombrowski has said, whenever you have when you can put a matchup out there that generally favors you, 162 games every night, you're gonna win an awful lot of games. I mean, they may not be perfect, but they are strong, and they can go deep into the games. They could go deep in the season, and I think that's where, if you combine the motivation of the 80 team with this team, and you look at the kind of the way these A11 and this team are comprised, of, the way that Ruben organized his 11 team and the way Dave has organized this team. I think those two teams are more similar in their composition, where their strengths lay,
Right.
And frankly, where some of their weaknesses are. I mean,
Yeah, I was curious, John. I've known you for a long time. Will you talk? I don't get too deep, but I think it's an important element of what you're about. How personal is it for you, for this team, to have success?
Yeah, well, it's that, Ruben, it's my legacy. I mean, I've done other things in my life, but I think when I retire, when my time comes, 10 years from now, if anybody remembers me for anything, they're not going to be remembered for anything else. They'll remember me for this. So however well or not well I serve and function, that's going to be my legacy. So it is everything to me.
Gotta have that bleeping trophy.
Gotta have that bleeping trophy.
I got to tell you, I don't know if you remember this, but if people they hear you say how much you want to win. So in spring training, I don't know if you remember this, I'm standing between the half field and the bullpen mounds at Baker Ballpark, and I'm standing next to Garrett Stubbs and Matt Gelb from The Athletic. And you walking in from the parking lot, and we go, "Good morning, John. How are you?" You go, and you keep moving. You go, "I'll tell you at 4:00." And kind of paused, and then Stubbs goes, "This guy really wants to win," because he's talking about winning a Grapefruit League game.
He was talking about that earlier today.
Yeah.
Wait, these last two games don't mean anything unless they sweep, I think.
Well, look, I can tell you, when I wrestled and I had scrimmages, my coach never congratulated me for putting up a good show, and losing. It was more about like, well, here's what you did wrong, and don't do that again. Yeah, I understand what spring training is, but spring training is also about, to use Vince Lombardi's great phrase, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Right.
You need to drive yourself to be perfect all the time, because that's when you get into those crunch situations in games that really matter. Your body has to know exactly how to perform. You can't be thinking it through at that moment. You've got to kind of have complete confidence in your athletic skills, complete confidence in your preparation, and just react. React to the ball if you're a hitter. React if you're the pitcher to the batter, to where your arm slot is, to where your release point is, to how far your stride is. All of that has to be automatic,
Right.
And you get it that way by constant repetition. I mean, thousands of times. I mean, when I was told when I was 14, 15 years old, if you're going to learn a new move in wrestling, before you try it in a match, you practice it 500 times by yourself. You practice it 500 times with somebody on top of you, just kind of, but not really stressing you out. And then you do it 500 times in scrimmages, during practice or a live scrimmage, before you take it onto the mat for when it counts. Because if you can't do it 1,000, 1,500 times perfectly, you're not going to do it right in the match. So that's why I said I'll tell you at 4 o'clock.
You won or lost that day, but I was thinking about that all day.
Yeah.
This man is competitive, and we know how much you want it. You guys are carrying a huge payroll. I think it's number 3 in the game.
Yep, and not far behind the Mets.
Not far behind the Mets. It's number 3 in the game. What tax threshold are you at?
Oh, we're over the top.
You're over the top.
Yeah.
I hear from fans all the time. Are they going to, if they have needs at the trade deadline, will they have the flexibility to address those?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, I'm telling you, this is Dave's call. It's not my call. It's Dave's call. And if you go back, for example, to last year, I mean, we looked hard. We talked to a lot of people. I mean, we pursued certain people very hard. And we made offers that I can't believe people rejected. But they did. And they were so I won't say excessive, but so generous on our part that Dave and I looked at each other and just said, you know what, we're ambivalent. If the deal comes through, we're okay. If it doesn't go through, we're perfectly fine keeping these players that we've offered. And we kept them. And you know what? I think in the long run, it's going to be better for us that we did that was the way it panned out. But, that's Dave's. That's Dave's call.
So speaking of that, there's other teams that have sort of infiltrated the Japanese market, that market. How important is it for your organization and for the sustainability of the organization for you to jump into that market? I know you've been trying.
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's any source of talent, Ruben, as you know, is you need to have access to it. You need to mine it. We've put a lot of time and effort and money over the last since Dave's arrived at having a presence, not just in Japan, but also in permanent presence in Korea and frankly around the world. And we make, Japan's probably the best international market, in terms of, I'll call MLB ready players. I mean, it's not like Latin America where you're signing 16-year-olds and sending them off to the Dominican Republic and hoping that they'll, by the time they're 18 or 19, that they'll be up here in the States. So, we're going to keep pushing, and we're trying to think about how we can make more of an impression to people and the players and the teams and try to just develop relationships that are going to prove to be fruitful in the long run. But we feel that we need to do that. And I think with Dave and, Jorge pushing, I think we'll be successful, but it's going to take time.
Johnny, you talk about the Japanese talent. You have Andrew Painter, Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford. I know.
Tayat.
What's that?
Tayat, the catcher.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I know you can't get into specifics, but you potentially could have traded some of those guys away last year. Has there been any talk since then about,
I'm sorry, about who?
About trading, maybe a Miller or Crawford, some of these top prospects last summer maybe involved in a deal where.
I say that you never know. And again, it's Dave's decision. But I think this offseason, certainly the trading deadline last July was an inflection point. And I think this past offseason was too. Because if these guys are now, Painter's virtually here.
Right.
I think Crawford could easily be up here if he has a good, couple of months at AAA. Miller's could charge in hard. I think those 3 guys in particular, they're close enough to be MLB ready that I think you'd have to have a really spectacular trade to think about trading either any of those people. And look, Ruben went through this. How long were we trying to get Doc? About a year and a half, something like that.
That's right.
But I think it was like 2 off seasons and a July trading deadline. And, eventually he said yes to get given up the Blue Jays what they wanted, fortunately. But, it's hard. As they get closer and closer, they become more valuable to you. And so it's harder to give them up.
And you need these guys coming through the system because you have a lot of free agents coming up this year. And Jeffrey Lurie, I think, was just talking the other day in a press conference saying how, it's when you're a good franchise and a good organization, it's almost impossible to keep everybody. I imagine you.
Oh, sure.
It's kind of, I don't know what's that feeling like when you have Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, Ranger Suarez, they're all free agents after the season. I'm sure you would love to keep them all. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. how do you feel about that when those guys are coming up?
It's unfortunately it's just part of the game.
Yeah.
It's part of the job, and Ruben knows that as well as anybody. I mean, it's really hard. I just don't know how else to say it, and you have to try to. I do talk to players conceptually about to tell them if you want to win, maximizing your salary to the last nickel puts the team in a lesser position where they can't. It's harder to spend the next nickel on getting the next player.
Right.
And so at some level, it does really kind of come down to what's the player's values, what do they want, and again, Ruben lived this. But, Cliff Lee gave up $26 million to not sign with two other teams and to sign with us. And that is because, Cliff said, I want to win. And it was more important for me to win than to get the last, dollar on a contract.
True. Yep, true statement.
Yeah. It was unbelievable that we got him. But that was what it takes. And by the way, I would tell you, when I was talking to Bryce and signing him, that's exactly the conversation I had. I said, we'll give you the money. It's a record for any pro athlete in any sport in North America. But I got to spread it out. Because if you want me to compress the time frame of the contract, then they drive the AAV up. I said, you're going to restrict what we can do, the flexibility we have to sign additional players. And that's Bryce's commitment to winning. That's before he even decides to change positions in the middle of the year, right?
So, he has a Fanatic tattoo on his arm now.
Yeah, he does.
To me, says, I see myself as a Philly for life.
I hope he does, because I see him as a Philly for life.
Okay, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you want Mike Schmidt to play for any other team? Why would you want Bryce Harper to play for any other team? That's when it's time for Bryce to hang up his cleats. The last time he plays, and I don't mean just come back for the day to retire. The last team he plays for should be the Philadelphia Phillies.
That's awesome.
John, you got the Dodgers coming in this weekend. Everybody's revved up for that. They're off to an unbelievable start. They are a behemoth.
They are.
You got the Mets.
But remind you, we did beat them both series last year.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and not by a little.
Yeah.
We
match up really well against them, I believe.
We do.
Yeah.
And the Mets are in the National League, and we know about Steve Cohen, and I think he has the same type of competitiveness as you do. What type of a challenge is it matching up, being in the same league as the Dodgers and the Mets?
Well, obviously, the stronger your competition is, win. That's a pretty obvious statement. But look, if you want to win the World Series, whether they're in the American League or the National League West or the National League East, you're going to have to beat them at some point in time. To be the best, you have to beat the best. And so, it's difficult because the financial resources that the Yankees have, the Mets have, and the Dodgers have is just significantly more than other people. In fact, Hal Steinbrenner is quoted as saying, we're at a huge disadvantage compared to the Dodgers. So that gives you a sense of where how perceives the competition and where he stands. But I'll also remind people that I think it was starting in 1981 that the Yankees had the highest payroll in baseball for 15 consecutive years, and they never managed to win the Eastern Division title and make the postseason. So it's not just about money. It's about having the right players and developing them and keeping them healthy. And as Pat Gillick loved to say, having the luck that you have 25 healthy players playing at the best of the game at precisely the right moment in time. So, that's why you play 162 games and then you play, 5 and 7 game series, because you don't win it on paper, you don't win it in the off season, and you don't win it in the media talk rooms. You win it on the field. So I think we match up with any of them, frankly. I think it's a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So the game has been evolving, John, and I wanted to get your opinion about this torpedo bat stuff. Obviously, there are some Phillies who are using it. I know that there's been some movement as far as the Phillies using them. What's your feeling about it, number one? And number two, I think that it's something that's going to help a lot of guys. Do you think the Phillies need that help?
Well, I think anytime there seems to be, I don't know that you chase every rabbit hole down,
Right.
to go down every rabbit hole, but I think there are moments when a variation of a product or what have you becomes available. And I think if you really go back to the comments about Doc and Mike, if you really want to change and stay at the top of your game, you need to kind of experiment. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I know, look, Alec Boehm has used that already.
Yep.
Other people have tried it out. Bryson Stott tried it out. It's going to work. As I think Bryson put it well, it's going to work for some people, and it's not going to work for others. But you don't know that until you try it enough to kind of come to that conclusion. So I think it's great. I think it's part of just the evolution of the game.
John, last one, and we will let you go. We appreciate the time.
Yeah.
This is the most important question I'm going to ask you. You were at the Super Bowl. You saw the Eagles win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
What do you think about the tush push? Or should they not ban it?
So I personally think it's like the torpedo bat. It's legal. So I don't know why teams don't use it while it's legal. And what I understand, everybody's so upset about talking about banning it. Why don't you just adapt and use it?
Amen.
Complaining about the torpedo bat, but refusing to try. Come on, guys, just try it. So I can't see why there aren't 31 other teams that are actually experimenting and using the tush push.
Absolutely. I get it.
Real quick, John. Real quick. I know we're running out of time, but Todd brought up the Super Bowl. You and your wife were at the Super Bowl. Just tell us about the walk back to the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
So the walk back was really great. I mean, obviously the Eagles had won and won handily. I mean, the place was a sort of giant Eagles party, which was great. But the fans were just so revved up, and as we're walking along with just thousands and thousands of fans, sometimes some people recognized us, sometimes they didn't, but people recognized us. They were high-fiving and saying, now it's your turn and you got to win it, and taking pictures and things like that. So it was a lot of fun.
Great stuff.
That was a great memory.
Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
John,
Thank you, guys.
so much.
Great
Thank you
stuff.
so much, guys. That's the Citizens Conversation. Phillies managing partner John Middleton. Thanks for the time. We will be back. FT.
FT fam, shout out to Homage. Make sure you check out the website and also use our code if you want a little 20% off if you're a first-time shopper. There are so many Major League looks in so many different ways that you can find on T-shirts. There's all kinds of pants. The starter jackets are fire this year, new and more improved, and just every team you're looking for, Kratz, they've got it for you.
I mean, I'm going to hit on the Phillies because they got the old school, the back in the day before I was born, my dad's old school P. But then the starter jacket with the maroon Phillies P on it, oh, baby, get that, John, because you can wear it all year when it's cold and in the spring when it's warming up.
Yeah, go for it. Heavier, higher quality fill to take you from spring training all the way to the playoffs. We've got them. Check out the website again, homage.com. I love their Grateful Dead baseball line as well. And use the code Foul Territory for 20% off if you are a first-time shopper. Get after it, FT fam.
All right. The Philly show is back on, guys. Yeah, we're back. We're doing it. We're doing it live.
I didn't know we were back. I was looking at Six Tower.
That was great.
We're doing a lot.
Our Manco and Manco pizza here, which is awesome.
Yeah, baby.
We love
Dig into
Manco,
that,
Manco,
baby.
of course.
Can I have
It's
a
not
piece?
best week yet. Best
Not
week
yet,
next
Jim.
week.
Not yet.
We actually just did a drawing for a Manco gift card. I think we'll announce it on our next show, the winner of our Manco and Manco gift card. So we have a few minutes left, guys, on the show. I want to ask you about Zack Wheeler's performance last night.
Yeah.
A couple things. So he's had 13 consecutive starts, 6 or more innings, 2 earned runs or fewer. There's only been like 18 pitchers since 1912 that have had a streak like that. Tom Seaver, Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux, Dwight Gooden, Gaylord Perry, Louis Tiant, Drysdale,
How about
Don
those names?
Drysdale, Walter Johnson,
The big train.
Zack Wheeler, the big train, Walter Johnson. And Zack, I mean, this guy, he's just unbelievable. He keeps it going. I mean, what
What do you got, Jim?
Zack Wheeler?
Yeah.
He's so serious about his craft. He reminds me of Doc Holliday a lot. There's times I actually misspeak and call him Doc occasionally. It's like It's crazy how good he is. But the way he attacks the strike zone, the way it's almost like you can send him out there to mound and you can depend on 6 innings, no more than 2 runs.
Yeah.
You play good defense behind him and hit a little bit, you're going to come out of there with a victory.
Yeah, to me, it's an evolution. I've watched this guy grow up, in my mind, here in the National League East after getting traded over to the Mets. Got hurt, had to go through Tommy Johns, the whole 9 yards. In 2018, he started becoming the guy, I thought. He was pitching with Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard and a really great staff, but it just seemed like there was something in him, and he continues to evolve, and I think John Middleton was talking about this. He continues to evolve as a pitcher because he's got power stuff, but he pitches like a pitcher. Like he pitches sort of like Greg Maddux-ish because he knows how important it is to carve up the strike zone, and he does it impeccably.
He commands everything.
What's cool about him is that he's never really satisfied with how he's going, and I think he just wants to get better all the time, and it's just been a pleasure to watch him, just having observed all the things that he's done to make himself the pitcher he is today. He's the best pitcher, starting pitcher in the major leagues. There's no question in my mind. He has been for the last several years, and it's unfortunate he hasn't been able to get a Cy Young, but at some point he will. God bless if he stays healthy and things just continue to go the way they're going.
So I say 13 consecutive starts, and to kind of put that in perspective, the last time he gave up more than 2 earned runs in a start was like August or maybe July 29th last season. That game he got lit up against the Yankees. Do you remember that? It was here at Citizen Bank Park. That was the last time he actually got hit around. Yeah, last year.
That might have cost him the Cy Young.
Yeah, that might have cost. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, he's been so good for this team, and he's just been dynamite. So funny, I was talking to him last night. He's like, I didn't really have my good fastball last night.
That's exactly
right. He said I didn't even know where it was going half the time.
Yeah,
I'm like, what?
Which is the amazing thing about him is that he, even without his best stuff, he adapts to making sure that he can get people out. Doesn't matter, and he doesn't care he wants to make quick outs, efficient outs, and that's the sort of the old school mentality that he brings to the table, and why he's so successful. I love it.
Yeah, and he's going to be a great resource and model, whatever you want to call it, mentor for Andrew Painter when he gets here.
Oh my gosh, I mean, Andrew was right next to his locker basically all spring training. Him and Matt Strom, and Aaron Nola was 5 feet away. So what a great experience for Andrew Painter all spring.
On top of Wheeler's performance last night, Trey Turner swung it very well, very encouraging.
Yeah.
Rojas gets down a couple bunts. I think I go back to when Trey pinch hit the other day. He's down 0-2, and he lays off a bunch of stuff in the dirt. And we talked about this a few podcasts ago, how sometimes one take can lock you in. And I just look at that plate appearance when he drew that walk after being down 0-2 as such a positive in maybe we're seeing something kind of evolve right before our eyes.
I totally agree with that. And I was right behind home plate when that at bat happened. I was watching with my brother, my man Taco. And I'm watching the pitch. He goes 0-2, as you said, and he basically fouled off a couple of fifths and a couple of the change-ups and the breaking balls. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a guy who's been a slasher and a hacker, a little bit, heads up, a little bit like Kyle Schwarber making the adjustment to becoming as good a hitter as he became last year, moving his points, 50 points in his batting average.
Right.
So old dogs can learn new tricks, and I do believe that they're making a concerted effort. Rojas, what he's bringing to the table, that's another example. I think the little adjustment that Kepler's made, I mean, he's making himself a better player. All these things are all positives, I think, that you're seeing some really positive things as far as the offense is concerned.
Just what John was saying, that these Hall of Famers made adjustments along the way, and look where it got them. Everybody can make an adjustment.
What do you guys – I know it's only been a few games, but Turner hitting leadoff against the lefties, Schwarber hitting leadoff against the righties.
I'm okay.
Are we on board with it? Maybe doing a platoon lineup for different, depending who's starting that night.
Again, I always feel like the same thing. Like the first 4 guys need to be the first 4 guys since they're the best offensive performers in your lineup, and consistently over 162, 700 plate appearances, whatever you want to call it. They're going to be your best performers. And to me, they're so interchangeable that they can almost hit anywhere. I don't want Harper to hit in a 1 hole, and I don't want Bone to hit in a 1 hole, but I mean, you start interchanging any of those guys. I think that as long as they're in the top of the lineup, top of the order, getting as many at bats and reps, I think they're fine, just fine.
And if they win and they produce, everybody's going to be fine with it.
That's right. Exactly.
It's all about the
Guys
W's, baby. Guys start whining a little bit when they struggle.
You know what I thought was cool last night is we know Rob Thompson really well. We talk to him all the time. He made a point last night to say that was the greatest major league game Johan Rojas has ever played.
That was awesome.
A bunt hit, a sacrifice bunt. He walked. He got on base. He moved the runners over. He ran the bases well. He played a brilliant center field. And that Rob Thompson made a point to say that last night. I'm sure he went up to him after the game and said it to him personally. But, you know,
Those are strong words, man. That's no joke.
I mean, that's
he's seen a lot of baseball. Rob Thompson's seen and developed players and been around baseball a long time.
Right.
For him to make that statement, and he's not one of those guys who overstates things. That's not who he is. He's a pretty understated guy. And for him to make that comment, one, it's got to be a great boost for Rojas.
Absolutely.
And two, it's also got to be a great boost for the team because it creates more depth on this ball club. Anytime you have that kind of depth on your team, it's a plus across the board.
Psychology 101. Now,
That's
that kid
right.
heard that comment, and I'll tell you what, he probably floated home, and he couldn't wait to get here today to keep improving and getting better. That's good skippering.
Yeah, it sure is.
Are we, guys, what do we think before we wrap this up? Don't want to look ahead past today's game, of course.
Right.
Taijuan Walker, the Phillies have a chance to sweep.
Yep.
But the Dodgers,
They're coming
into town this weekend. Are we excited about this series, even though it's early April? I am. I mean, just especially because the Dodgers are undefeated.
That's a great ball club. I actually like the fact, as a Philly fan, I like the fact that they're coming in undefeated. They're going to lose a game at some point.
Right.
And what better way to start a little bit of a losing streak against the Phillies? But to me, it's going to be a great series. They're two great teams, two of the best teams in the National League, without question, even on paper. I think they're probably two of the most complete ball clubs. I think the Dodgers may have a little bit of an edge in a couple of areas, but again, the Phillies match up well against them. I think they played well against them. And, hey, you never know what's going to happen until the games are played, but it'll be a heck of a weekend for the Philly faithful.
It'll be great. A lot of juice. Yamamoto, Sasaki, Otani, they're all going to be in center stage. But, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a big test for the Phillies because we got 6 months of baseball to play. Guys are up and down. Teams change. There's acquisitions, guys. So you don't know what these teams are going to look like late in the season. I mean, they're going to be pretty much the same, but I would not call it a huge test, but it's a nice little quiz for the Phillies. But it ain't going to make or break this season. It would be nice if they went out and played well, though, just to kind of have it in the back of your mind that you can handle these guys.
That's right. And I just think it's just the entertainment factor.
Oh, yeah.
You know, for sure, right?
Great theater.
It's just great theater. Jimmy.
Yeah.
The theater, Jim, of baseball.
Oh, we love theater.
You know, you got, like you said, the three Japanese superstars. You have the World Series champions. The Phillies are trying to get there.
No,
they have superstars.
The juice is going to be incredible for first weekend of April. I mean, geez, you can't beat that.
Not with a stick, Jim. Can't beat it with a stick.
Can't beat it with a stick. Can't beat it with a slice of Mancos and Mancos.
No. I'm getting on one of these.
Right.
Right after this, I'm starving.
Yeah, I'm starving. So, guys, that fun. John Middleton was fantastic. You know, he's always
stuff, man.
great guy. But that was a great story. I do remember that in spring training. He walked by and said, "I'll tell you at 4:00," and we're like,
he's probably saying the same thing about this ball game.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. So, guys, we'll be back. We're going to have a little more Dodgers preview, look ahead tomorrow, kind of wrapping up this series tomorrow. So go to the Philly Show. Subscribe to the Philly Show on YouTube. You know, follow us on Apple.
Got a cool guest tomorrow.
We've got a cool guest tomorrow. Absolutely.
We're going to be Citizens. Awesome
stuff.
Yeah.
Citizens, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great.
It's a great time to Citizens conversation with Phillies managing partner
Thank
John
you, Citizens.
Middleton.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you, everybody. The Philly Show. The Philly Show, brought to you by Citizens. Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of the Phillies.
Bring it in, boys. Smell you later.
Smell ya.